McDonald's run. I go into it with the best of intentions, I'm excited, and I somehow seem to always leave with low self-esteem and a tummy ache. Now, some of you can relate, clearly. I know that isn't the case all across the board, but for some of us, dating's been a little rough, okay? I don't know if it's inflation or something in the water, but things are not easy in the dating world, and someone on this side agrees, okay? And I have 2 points to back up my thesis. The first is a personal testimony. So a couple weeks ago, on our Instagram, our project Instagram page, I asked our followers to share some dating horror stories, and I don't know what I was expecting, but you guys really blew me out of the water, and I genuinely, sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, hope that God just, repays you for the suffering that you had to endure. So we're going to take a look right now at some of those stories. So here's the first one. Forgot my name at the end of the date. Now, what you don't know is that was actually mine. That was my contribution. And what I will say, I'll go to that one in a second here, but what I will say about that was that I'm just really glad that we only went for coffee and we didn't get dessert, because the piece of humble pie that caused me to eat in that moment was a lot. So second one here. He took me to a rodeo for our first date with his family. Some of you are like, that's very ideal, and maybe you should find this guy. I don't know. Let's go to the next one here. Date from church. Spent 75% of the date talking about how bad Bible college was. No comment for legal reasons. Let's go to the next one. He peed outside in front of me, then proceeded to try to kiss me. I have so many questions, but I don't want answers. Let's go to the next one. I drove 3 hours for a date, and they didn't even offer to pay for my lunch. That's just criminal. Next one. This one gets me. Dating for 3 months and got ghosted on a bike ride. And I do have several questions. Did he not show up for the bike ride? Did he ditch you halfway through the bike ride? So many questions. Next one. Okay. I turned down her advances repeatedly. Then on New Year's Eve, she called me and left a voicemail pretending to be her own mother, telling me that I should date her because she deserves me and because it's our destiny to end up together. You just can't make this stuff up, you guys. You can't. Let's go to the next one here. And this is the last one. Also crazy. One time, I asked the guy I'd been seeing for 7 years. 7 years. This was such a toxic relationship, obviously, if we should go for dinner after not seeing each other for a month. And he told me he was in Japan. Let the evidence speak for itself. Now, the second reason why I feel like it's so hard to date in 2024 is because dating kind of feels like a sport. Now, I don't think it's inherently wrong to use dating apps, and if you've seen me on one, no, you haven't, but if you're not careful, their gamification can really get the best of you. In fact, the current CEO of the Match Group, which owns Hinge and Tinder, was previously the CEO of a gaming company called Zynga. So the Farmville guy is now dictating your love life. Do with that what you will. And while there's a theme in app marketing that you'll find the love of your life, and Hinge, it's coined itself as being the app that's designed to be deleted. These companies are designing addictive and game-like apps with swipes and coins and hearts and roses and fun colors. Hinge, Tinder, and Match are actually being sued right now with these very strong allegations against them, such as encouraging compulsive behavior, locking in users to a perpetual pay-to-play loop, and fostering swiping addictions. So that's pretty crazy. And even beyond that, there's the elements of situationships and leading people on and ghosting and saving face. And so for some, it can easily turn into a game of getting what you want, no matter what the cost. Maybe it's talking to a bunch of people at once so you can beat that feeling of loneliness. Maybe it's using someone for their money or for the dopamine hit you get from knowing that you have their attention. Maybe it's casual hookups or one-night stands because you're desperate for even just an ounce of gratification. The way that I see it, we can kind of see dating on a spectrum. Those examples I mentioned earlier on the one side, dating for sport, dating without any future intentions, casual sex, keeping your relationships from view of anyone in your life that cares about you, something that's super pleasure-focused. And each of those things conflicts with Christian principles. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's also been some really harmful ideologies about dating and relationships that have run rampant within mainstream churches. I think of toxic purity culture that was pretty hush-hush about sex unless it was instilling fear into young people about losing your virginity before marriage, and how that was just pretty much the biggest sin of all time. Now, for the record, I do believe that God's design for sex within the loving and safe confines of marriage is what the Bible calls us to do, and I think that it makes a lot of sense. But these extreme teachings instilled fear and shame surrounding sex and our bodies. And I think that, this, in the same sense, that fear and shame, it also trickled down to our romantic relationships and how we perceive those. At least it did for me. And so within these Christian circles, there's a general disdain for dating. Instead, they push for what's called courtship, where parents of both parties are a lot more involved. The guy asks the girl's father for permission to date her, and they really only go on group dates. And those things aren't inherently wrong, but courting was really only encouraged if the couple was intending on getting married. But how do you know you want to marry someone if you've never gone on a date with them? You can kind of see how there's a little bit of a flaw there. It placed an emphasis on girls being responsible for the impure thoughts that guys had about them. It taught that the desire for the opposite sex should be suppressed rather than celebrated within the proper biblical context. What was meant to be an alternative to the world's way of doing things kind of turned into a harsh set of rules that teens and young adults were expected to follow. And if they did, they would have the most ideal marriage and great sex. It placed virginity and marriage on a very unnecessary pedestal. And I'm sure that following these rules probably worked for some people, and praise God for that. But for others, it's been quite damaging to their perception of love and relationships. What if you didn't end up with the first guy that you made eye contact with when you were 19? What if you did have sex before marriage? What if you did get married, but it wasn't a perfect fairy tale? Then what? Where do we find ourselves then? I don't want to do things the world's way, but I also don't want the pressure of a marriage proposal after the first coffee date. And what's even trickier about the topic of dating is that there is no blueprint for it in the Bible. Yes, the Bible is clear about intentions for marriage, sexuality, and singleness, but biblical dating doesn't exist. Marriages were arranged by parents and included some type of bride price or dowry, so a payment made by a guy as a gift to the family of the girl he was interested in marrying. It could be money, jewelry, some type of valuable or a service rendered. So ladies, take note. If a guy's like, hey, I just really want to date you biblically, and just is really honing in on that, ask him to give your dad $25,000. Sounds pretty biblical to me. Now, as much as I would love a fat stack of cash or a really cool gift, that practice was simply the cultural norm of the time. It's not an absolute truth that we need to apply to our own lives, but thankfully the Bible is filled with timeless truths that are applicable as we navigate the world of dating. And in all honesty, this has been an area of a lot of confusion, frustration, heartache, disappointment, amongst many other things in my own life. But my view of relationships has been radically transformed as I've implemented these principles into my own life. And so I hope that they can do the same thing for you as well. And so if you're here tonight and you're single and you're hoping to get married one day, please take notes. If you're dating or married, still take notes, because a strong marriage is comprised of two single and secure people. One pastor that I've listened to on the subject, he makes this really good point, that we were born single, we're going to die single, and we are going to stand before God single. So no matter where you find yourself relationally, there is always room to grow. And maybe you're here tonight and your relationship is on the rocks and you just need to do a little bit of self-reflection so that you can be a better partner. Maybe this message will cause a few breakups. I'm just the messenger, so don't get mad at me, but maybe you're here tonight and you don't even have the desire to be married. And hey, that is totally fine too, because I believe that some, not all, but some of what we're going to get into tonight could be applicable to your own walk with Christ, your personal development and the close relationships that are in your life. But since we're playing the dating game, I want to give you 3 ways to win at dating. The first is to know your why. Know your why. Now, there's a few elements to this. The first is having a vision for yourself and for your life. A core Christian truth is that God loves each one of us and has a unique plan and purpose for our lives that he intends for us to fulfill. This is what it says in Ephesians 2:10. For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so we can do the good things he has planned for us long ago. So our talents, our hobbies, our passions, our career paths, and so many more things all contribute into who God has made each of us to be and what he wants us to do on this earth. And so when you have security in who God has made you to be and you're actively pursuing his plan for your life, you're winning. You're winning because your identity isn't being shaped by what other people think of you or your successes or failures or status or anything else. It's being shaped by him. And to him, you are loved, you are valued, you are cherished, you are his masterpiece. A huge disservice you can do to yourself is dating someone who is visionless, who has no goals or aspirations beyond what's surface level. If they aren't rooted and grounded in God, they will be shaken by the ups and downs of life. In Matthew 7, Jesus is sharing a parable. A parable is a short story that has a moral lesson. And so in verses 24 to 27, he shares the story of the wise and foolish builder. And here's what it says. Anyone who listens to my teaching and follows it is wise, like a person who builds a house on solid rock. Though the rain comes in and torrents the floodwaters rise, and the winds beat against that house, it won't collapse because it's built on bedrock. But anyone who hears my teaching and doesn't obey it is foolish, like a person who builds a house on sand. When the rains and floods come and the winds beat against that house, it will collapse with a mighty crash. You could spend your whole life trying to drag someone along who has no desire to run after the incredible life that God has given them. You could live with that burden, or you could do life with someone who has foresight into what they're supposed to contribute to this world, and you could run after God and is calling for both of you together. And here's the thing, none of us are ever going to fully arrive, but look for someone who's on that trajectory. And so in a sense, I think that you should totally date potential in the sense of you can see that they're on the right path and that the goal, the destination is something that is good and something that's in alignment with your values. They have the capacity to thrive and to succeed. So date potential. Don't date a project. Don't date someone you need to fix. You can come to the project. Don't date one. Guys, you have no idea how long I've been holding on to that one. Let me tell you. Now, let's think about your why for dating. Your core reason for pursuing relationships, the thing that is grounding you and that's giving you motivation. And if you've already thought through the first why, the second one should be a lot easier to identify. Now, let me give you a hot take, okay? Dating for the sake of dating is stupid. And if you're doing that, you should stop. If you're bored, get Duolingo. Learn an instrument. I don't care. If you're lonely, join a book club. Join your community league. I don't care. Stop wasting your time. Stop wasting their time. Stop wasting your heart. Stop wasting their heart, okay? Dating is not about getting a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It's about figuring out whether or not the person in front of you is God's pick to be your husband or your wife. Now, the following are a list of reasons why people date and get married, and they just aren't good enough reasons on their own. And so maybe you've been vocal about these reasons in your own life. Maybe it's things you've just thought in your head. And I might ruffle some feathers here, but Ruben was calling out the guys for playing Call of Duty a couple weeks ago, so I don't really think we can be mad at me, but here we go. I want to be happy. I want a dual income. I want to get laid. Don't use that one out of context. I want to start a family. I want my mom to get off my back. I want to feel secure. I want to feel loved. I don't want to die alone. Now again, Those are definitely some benefits you can experience within an eventual marriage relationship, but they miss the mark of what marriage was actually intended for. First off, notice the continual pattern of I statements. I want this, I want that, I don't want this, I don't want that. It's very me-centered, which is the total opposite of what biblical marriage is supposed to be. And so what is it supposed to be? If we go all the way back to the first book of the Bible, it's called Genesis, we can see 4 different reasons why God created marriage. The first is friendship. In Genesis 2:18, after God made the first man, Adam, he says, "It is not good for the man to be alone." So within a marriage relationship, you get to do life with the person that you like being around, someone that you enjoy. You get to do life with someone who knows you better than anyone and for some reason isn't set off by all your weird quirks and habits. You get to do life with someone who fully knows you and fully loves you. Through the thick and thin of life, you have someone to celebrate with, to mourn with, and to grow with. So the second reason is calling, and this ties in with the whole idea of vision that I was talking about earlier. Genesis 2:15 says this, "God placed the man in the Garden of Eden to tend and watch over it." Before that, back in chapter 1, it states that humans would reign over all creation. And then a command is given for them to be fruitful and to multiply and to reign over and to govern the earth. They were given a calling, a gardening project. One of my favorite authors, John Mark Comer, says this, "All healthy marriages are built around a calling. Marriage is a means to an end. It exists to partner with God for the remaking of shalom." And so shalom is the Hebrew word for peace, but it also goes deeper to convey soundness, well-being, and complete reconciliation. And so that paints the idea that your relationship goes beyond just the two of you, but you actually have an obligation to help bring back the Lord's peace to the earth. So the third is sexuality. We've touched on God's design for sex in this series already, so if you missed them, go to our YouTube channel, watch them. So I won't camp here for too long, but what I will say is that sexuality is a part of our humanity. And it was in God's design for you to share that with another person. And so within a marriage relationship, that's a good and godly thing. And so it's not wrong to want to get married because you want to have sex, but just don't make that your only reason, okay? And lastly, marriage was created for family. That command I just shared, to be fruitful and to multiply, was actually the first command in the entire Bible. Families are intended to spread God's rule throughout the earth. It's kind of like an extension of your calling or your gardening project. It's going to take more than just one person or one marriage or one family to bring shalom, to bring peace back to the earth. And that doesn't mean that you have to get married. It doesn't mean you have to have kids, but this is one extremely important medium that God uses. And so when you know your why, it's a lot easier to know what you're looking for. You're not just open to anything or anyone, and it can save you a lot of time and heartache, especially as you start to identify the things that you value and can see if your potential prospect is in alignment with what you want, with your values, or if they conflict. Now, don't be mad at me, okay? I'm saying this with all of the love in the world because I love you guys so much, but some of you, and I'm not even looking at anyone specifically, I'm just going to look just up here so no one thinks that I'm calling them out. Some of you are real thirsty, okay? Some of you are absolutely parched, okay? You are parched for love. You are thirsty for a relationship. And when you're physically thirsty to the point of desperation, you'd pretty much drink anything. Picture yourself in the Sahara. It's scorching, and there's nothing but sand and sun just enveloping you. It's just so hot. You're desperate. You're so thirsty. And all of a sudden, what do you see in front of you? But a glass of cold 2% milk. You're going to drink it. You would. Your stomach will hate you, but you'd still drink it. And in the same way, when we're desperate for a relationship, we will settle for what's right in front of us, even if it's not a good match for us. In desperation, vision and value just completely go out the window. So picture yourself back in that desert, just like a cartoon character. You're crawling through, thirsty, and then in the distance there's a beautiful oasis that just appears before you. And you muster up every ounce of strength that you have, and you start running towards that body of water, only to land face first in more sand. You were tricked by a mirage. You thought you saw water, but it was an illusion. And the same thing can happen in romantic relationships. When we're parched, when we want that person so badly, we may start to see things that are not really there. Our view of them may get distorted. We might make excuses for poor behavior. And as the girlies say, we might get a little delulu. And we've all been there. We've all been there. We have, oh, he's just really into fitness, and that's why he follows 100 gym girlies on Instagram and comments on all their pictures and likes all of them. Girl, he's checking them out. Get it together. Wake up. She's just so intentional about our relationship, and that's why I have to spend every evening with her. And it totally makes sense that she would freak out every time I want to spend time with family and friends. Homie, she is isolating you, okay? This one's real. This one was for myself, so don't worry. He's just so busy with work and life, and that's why he leaves me undelivered for a week and doesn't bother to call. And that's a word for someone tonight. Girl, I love you. I love you. He does not want to talk to you, okay? He doesn't. He doesn't. Just, if you take anything from tonight, it might just be that. Oh, she's just playful, and that's why she makes the meanest jokes about me in front of my friends. No, she's tearing you down. He's not connected to a church, but he's spiritual. Cool. He sounds like he's going to make a really great spiritual leader in your household one day. Wow. And the thing is, we're all thirsty for something. There is a void in each of us. And we can try and fill it with a spouse or kids or a career or status or material things or whatever it is, but at the end of the day, those things will never truly satisfy us. But the good news is that God is the living water. He will satisfy every longing in our lives, and if we drink of his Spirit, if we partake in his Spirit of grace, we will never be thirsty again. Psalm 42, verse 1 says this: "As a deer gets thirsty for streams of water, I truly am thirsty for you, my God." So what are you thirsty for? Who are you desperate for? Someone who gives you the absolute bare minimum and makes you feel like you have to strive for their approval? Someone who constantly leaves you questioning your worth and value? Someone who hits you up only when they need something from you? Someone who makes you choose between them and God? There is a much better alternative, okay? And it's a God who loves you, who longs to be in relationship with you, who sent his son to pay the price for your sin through death. So drink, will never thirst again. And a spouse is a really bad substitute for God. So to win at dating, you need to know your why. The next thing you need to do or consider is giving personal and spiritual development a try. And yes, these do rhyme, and yes, I'm very sorry, but the Bible doesn't play around when it comes to wisdom. It hypes it up like crazy. So this is what it says in Proverbs 3:13-18. "Joyful is the person who finds wisdom, the one who gains understanding. For wisdom is more profitable than silver, and her wages are better than gold. Wisdom is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare with her. She offers you long life in her right hand and riches and honor in her left. She will guide you down delightful paths. All her ways are satisfying. Wisdom is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Happy are those who hold her tightly." Evidently, there are so many benefits to growing in wisdom and developing into the person God has called you to be. It's seen as more valuable than money. It opens doors to a prosperous life and to honor. It brings about peace and blessing. And that's a great reality to be walking into with a future partner. Now, the primary goal of working on yourself isn't to trick God, if I finish my Bible in a year reading plan, then I expect to meet my spouse on January 1st of next year. It doesn't work like that. And that type of thinking can honestly get you into some trouble. If a relationship was a reward for our work, then no one would get married because no one will ever fully arrive. And you can also get caught up in a game of comparison where you're comparing your holiness to the holiness of the people around you. That's the thing, jealousy, not a good look on you, so stop. Both singleness and marriage are gifts of God's grace in our lives. So work on you because you're worth it. And yes, a byproduct of that is, it will benefit your current or future relationship. Things like growing in spiritual disciplines, Bible reading, prayer, fasting, Sabbath, learning how to manage your finances, developing your career. All of those things will serve you well now and in your future. And we all carry different types of baggage with us as well. There's a lot of things that can be traced down to our family of origin or traumatic events that we've been through. And so if you haven't, no matter what your relationship status, I strongly recommend spending some time in therapy with a licensed therapist to unpack some of those issues or anything else that you might be facing so that you can start a journey of healing. I'm sure there are a lot of people in the room right now who come from very challenging family dynamics. And if that's you tonight, I'm really sorry. Maybe you didn't see an example of a strong and healthy marriage, and it's caused you to be bitter or fearful or to just spiral into a web of very poor choices when it comes to dating. So I just want you to know tonight that God is a God of transformation, and that with his help, you can break those cycles, whether it's divorce, addiction, abuse, or whatever else. Those things can be broken. We serve a God that is in the business of redemption, and he can redeem your perception of marriage if you allow him to. And so in addition to those steps, if that's you tonight, I would also highly recommend spending some time with couples or families that you want to be like, people that you want to emulate. I started doing this, and it's like one of the most important practices in my life. Some of those relationships are really intentional. I meet with a couple mentors monthly, and relationships are a very popular topic of conversation. And so I'll ask questions. How did you meet your spouse? How do you balance ministry and family? What are green flags I should look for? How do you navigate problems as a family? And those conversations have just been so helpful and so life-giving to me. Sometimes it's just even observing my married friends, seeing how they treat each other, how one spouse talks about the other when they're not in the room, seeing how they resolve small conflicts that come up. You may have not had the best example, but know that the church is a community of people that can fill the role of spiritual mother or father or brother or sister. And sometimes we can miss out on that aspect a little bit because the project is geared towards young adults. But, it's something that we really value as a larger church, as Hope City. And so if that's something you're interested in, just like finding an older mentor, someone who's been further along that can just pass down some wisdom to you, please talk to me or Brett or Jeff or Ruben, and we will make sure that can happen. So again, you'll never fully arrive. And it's not like you just stop working on yourself once you're married, but you'll have a serious leg up if you're actively working through past hurts as well as any bad habits or hang-ups. Marriage won't solve your problems, but it will amplify them. So grow, work, and mature now while you're navigating your dating journey for the sake of your own walk with Christ and for your future relationship. And so the last thing you can do to win at dating that I want to touch on tonight is to encourage and to edify. And so this is very relevant to kind of how you navigate your dating relationships. So dating is a risk. You're putting your heart, your feelings, your vulnerabilities all on the table, and there's a chance you could get hurt. And those factors combined with some of the common and unfortunate patterns of ghosting, leading people on, not being clear with intentions, can make the whole process stressful and complicated. And maybe you're feeling internal and external pressures to get married, and that just has kind of warped worry into your dating life. Take a deep breath, okay? Like I said before, the process of dating is simply an opportunity to figure out whether or not the person in front of you is God's pick for you. It's a chance to have fun, to meet someone, and to see and celebrate what God is doing in and through their lives, and to see if your calling and their calling could be in alignment. So don't overcomplicate things in your head. So to encourage is to give support, confidence, or hope to someone. To edify is to improve someone's mind. A guy named Paul, who was a pioneer in the early church, wrote about these things in several of his letters to various churches, which are recorded in the Bible. In 1 Thessalonians, he instructs the church to encourage each other and to build each other up. In Romans 14:19, it says, "Let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to peace and to mutual edification." I even think of his words in Philippians where he instructs, "Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look out only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too." So what if that was the standard that we set for dating? Where instead of placing emphasis on our own desires, we humble ourselves and we look out for the other person? What if instead of not communicating, we use our words to build each other up? What if instead of causing division, we strive for peace? What if instead of burning bridges, we actually leave people better than we found them? I think that if we did that, we could really change the dating game in our city. Now, I know that was a lot, and this subject I'm very passionate about, so I hope there were some nuggets of truth that you were able to hold on to. And I could probably write a whole book on the subject, and who knows, maybe I will. But as we close, I want to challenge you to think about which one of those 3 areas you need to hone in on, regardless of your relationship status. Maybe you haven't been living with vision in your life, and you just need to ask God, what do you want from me? Maybe you've just been running away from what that is, and you just need to face it. Ask him what your calling, what that gardening project is for your life. Maybe it's engaging in personal and spiritual development so that you can lay a strong foundation for your future. Or it's continuing the foundation that you already have. Maybe it's letting go of bad dating habits and challenging yourself to treat the next person that you go out with as someone who is loved by God. And for me, it's probably all 3 of those things, if I'm being honest. But really quickly, I want to speak to those of you here tonight who have, maybe you just find yourself struggling with singleness and dating, and especially those of you who are in your mid-20s, 30s, and maybe you had a specific timeline of what you wanted marriage and a family to look like. And it hasn't panned out. You're going into wedding season without a +1 again, and all of your friends are at that stage, and maybe you just kind of feel like you're behind. And if that's you, I'm sorry. I may not know your exact situation, but I can definitely relate to that feeling. My core group of friends are all pretty much married. My best friend is getting married this summer, and I guess we were maid of honor, which is incredible. A few of my friends are even pregnant now. That's just a whole nother ballgame. But I'm really excited to be an auntie, so that's great. But I would be lying to you if I said that I haven't had to wrestle through insecurity and comparison. And so for what it's worth, let me just encourage you tonight. First of all, you are not less loved or less valuable because of your relationship status. So please do not let that lie have 1 more ounce of time in your head. Singleness is not a call to loneliness. It's an invitation for undivided devotion to Christ, and that's a really beautiful thing. And you can be married and still be lonely. It's okay to grieve your expectations of what you thought would be, where you hoped you would be. God can handle that. You can be real with him. But please don't let that disappointment rob you of joy or just rob you of what's in front of you right now. Every stage of life has beauty, and it also has its challenges. Even just talking with some of my friends this week, I have friends who are married, but they're having a really hard time at work. I have friends who are married, but they're having struggles with fertility. We all have things. We all have problems, and marriage is not going to be a universal Band-Aid that's going to fix everything for you. We might just see the ending of the fairy tale, but we don't see, what happens when someone loses their job or you're having trouble having kids or whatever it is. We don't always see, we probably just see the Instagram highlight reel, if we're being honest, of everyone's life. And so another thing that I'll share with you is, actually, funny enough, my ministry at the project was kind of birthed out of a heartbreak, actually. oh my goodness, like, I don't know, 4-ish years ago now or something. I was working at another church, kind of would go to the project in and out sporadically, and then faced a very heartbreak, end of a long-term relationship. And all of a sudden, the project just kind of became this lifeline. And it was during COVID, so I didn't really talk to anybody. I would literally just come in with my mask on, cry, and then leave, and do the same thing every week. But it was like every week there was just some type of like glimmer of hope through the message or through the worship or through someone that I would cross paths with. And I had no idea that all of this time later I would be here on this stage. And I think of all of the different things that needed to happen in order for me to get to this very moment right now. And it actually did start with heartbreak, a very sad Abbey, but one that was willing to let God work in and through her. And so all that to say, I'd like to think that I'm a pretty good writer, but God's a much better writer than I am. And had I known, like, those nights when I'd come to the project alone and just feeling so hopeless that this was the life that God had for me, I would have been like, nah, it's too good to be true. And it is, and it has been. And so just know that if you're here tonight and like you're brokenhearted, it's actually biblical. The Lord is near the brokenhearted. It's like an automatic thing. You don't even need to ask. He's already there. And if you just surrender like the pen of your story and just let him write it, I promise you, he will write a much better story than what you could even fathom. And so genuinely, I used to think that being single was like the worst thing in the world, but I've genuinely come to realize that not following God's plan for my life is. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'd love to get married sooner rather than later, but I can genuinely, like, I'm not just saying this because I'm paid to be here, but like, I can genuinely say, like, this has been my favorite season of life, and I'm really gonna miss it when it's over. I live with an incredible sense of fulfillment because I know that I am pursuing God's plan for my life. I have incredible friends and an incredible family. I love that I get to celebrate milestones with the people closest to me, like weddings and buying houses and graduations and babies and all of those things. I love the freedom and independence I have in this season. And I get to serve an incredible God who continues to draw me in close day in and day out. And so genuinely, I really thought I'd never say this, you guys, so hold me to it. But, it's actually going to take a very phenomenal man for me to give up this season of my life, personally. And I didn't get to this spot overnight. I didn't. It took years of therapy and reflection and God just working in my heart, a lot of prayer, him revealing insecurities in my heart, him revealing fears in my heart. But I'm very happy to be here. And I know that if you seek God, you can also arrive at a place of contentment. And it doesn't mean that everything's like fine and that you don't have longings for what the future could be, but it's also just a beauty in being like, this season right now, on this day, March 3rd, 2024, it's a great day. And I know I'm exactly where I need to be. So before we close, I had a couple of thoughts, and I just didn't really know where to put them in my sermon. So we're just going to finish off with them here. But number one, rejection is God's redirection and protection. Take that as you will with whatever context you need to in your life, whether that's with a job or school or relationship. Please, please, please just trust that God knows so much more. He knows so much more than you do, and that he really does have the best of intentions for you. So see rejection not as something that's so personal, but see it as God's redirection and his protection over your life. Second thing, project is a great place, but the project is more than just a place to find your future spouse. I know it's a great place to look, but it can be more than that. It really can be, And I think that, we love the social aspect of what this place is. Like, I'll be the first one to tell you. But also I would just encourage you, if that's kind of your view right now, it can be more. It can be more. This can be a place where you learn and grow and have genuine, true encounters with the living God. Third thing, last thing, my one last piece of advice. As someone who's not married, so take it as you will, I guess. Maybe a married person can back me up. I don't know. But when you're thinking of who that person is going to be, choose someone who you're better for the kingdom with, who you're better for the kingdom together than apart. When you think about that calling, someone who, you're going to need that person actually to fulfill that calling that God has for the both of you. Let that be the driving thing, not how tall they are, not how much money they have, all these superficial things that at the end of the day aren't really going to matter. Just bring it down to that at the end of the day. And so friends, let me pray for you before we sing together. God, we just thank you. Thank you for your goodness and for your grace in each of our lives, Lord. I thank you that you know each person in this room just like so intimately, Lord, that they're not just like a seat in this room, Lord, but you know each detail. You know the number of hairs on their head, Lord. You know everything about us. And you desire to be in relationship with us. And I just pray, in those moments for those of us who, are longing, who are searching, who are hoping, Lord, that we would find contentment in you first and foremost, God. And that you would lead us to that person whenever it is, Lord. If we need to surrender our expectations, our desires, Lord, would we do that? And even knowing that if we don't meet that person and that desire never comes true, that it's okay. That it's okay because at the end of the day, all that we need is you. And Lord, I pray for the relationships at the project, those who are dating, those who are married, Lord, and we celebrate that and we thank you for it. And I pray that you would just continue to strengthen those relationships, God, that they would just walk in godly integrity, that they would be examples for those of us who are looking, Lord. Thank you that in each season of life that you are good and that you are God. Amen. I'll invite you to stand. We're going to continue in worship together. If you need prayer for anything, maybe it was something specific to the message or just anything else going on in life, we're going to have our prayer team at the front, and they would love to pray with you. But let's continue worship together.